got his bachelor's degree at the Catholic University in Lima in 1990. He did his PhD degree at Columbia University in 1994, postdoc at Los Alamos National Laboratory from 94 to 96. He joined the University of North Carolina at Charlotte in 96 and is now a full professor there. He was a 2002 Henry Dreyfus Teacher Scholar, a 2005 IUPAC, that's International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry, Young Observer, and a 2007 Fulbright Scholar. He's been an author, a co-author in 60 peer-reviewed publications. He's interested in synthetic and structural inorganic chemistry, organometallic chemistry, and bioinorganic chemistry. I should point out that, of course, his interests are strongly also directed towards teaching. The University of North Carolina at Charlotte has a very strong teaching component to the professorships there. But tonight, he will speak to us about a different area that I'll bring up in a minute. If we could have the first slide, I want to mention a few things about the program before I tell you what his topic will be. Can I get the first slide? We have a program here that is sponsored by the Dean of the College of Science, Dr. Dean Newton. We've had a number of different topics. This shows you a selection from 2009 and 10. This was chemical engineering, chemistry vote. One of our own gave us a talk on the use of nanoscience in cancer. That was Big Fights and Little Medicines. And Professor Harry Gray from Caltech talked about solar energy. A variety of topics, and we have another one of such topics tonight. If I can have the next slide. These talks are supported by Dow Chemical, who have, for those of you who are up in the stockroom, have seen the Dow Aggie Laboratory Stockroom Endowment was founded in 2009. Expenses for this program for the speaker to travel here are paid by Cengage Learning, the people who put out the IELTS system, which you may be enthused about or may not. Yeah, I knew it. And also the textbooks. Next slide. Earlier this year, the program included talks by Dr. Jim Stevens and Professor Catalina Achim in the fall, and Professor Jordan North, one of our own, in this spring, talked about climate science. But today, we have next Professor Daniel Rabinovich, and the position I didn't tell you he has is the editor of Philatelia Chimica de Physics, et Physics, which means postage stamps related to chemistry and physics. So he will tell you about that, and I want you to give a hospitable Aggie welcome to Professor Rabinovich.
To be here. Thanks for the introduction. It's really always a great opportunity to talk about two of my passions, because it's stamp collecting and chemistry. And if I can give a talk that combines both, well, that's always going to be a lot of fun. So I will explain a lot of, I will show some stamps, but I will explain how I use also stamps to teach chemistry, to communicate science to a general public. And so we'll see plenty of examples of that. And so in the beginning, right, let's go back to the 1830s. In the 1830s, right, whomever was receiving a letter had to pay for the letter. Okay, and so this is a cover from 1835. It's a French cover, and whomever got the letter had to pay six francs. Okay, so they thought that wasn't really completely fair. It wasn't really proportional to the distance or the weight of the letter or package. And so this guy, Rowland Hill, an English teacher and inventor, social reformer, introduced postage stamps as a very convenient way of of prepaying for postage. That's really the bottom line. A good way to prepay for postage, so whomever was sending the letter or package had to pay for it. And so that's the beginning of stamps. The very first stamp is the famous penny black with Queen Victoria, 1840. This stamp showed here. Now this word, philately, right, which is fancy for stamp collecting, comes from the Greek, is to love to be exempt from tax. Right, don't we all, right? And that really explains that origin, the origin of whomever was receiving the letter from now on would be exempt from tax, from having to pay for that letter. In more modern terms, philately is the collecting and study of postage stamps and other postal matter. I'll show you some examples as a hobby, or as I tell my wife, as an investment. Right? Of course, she's not here, so I can say that. And so stamps, right, in general, right, are made for sending letters or packages. They don't need to be really, they just need to be pretty. They have all kinds of topics, fruits or teddy bears or whatnot. And so there are some, however, other stamps that do have a message, do have some contents, right? So here are examples of some stamps that have been issued to commemorate some specific event, to educate the public, history, art, literature, sometimes even science. And so here's some stamps with, say, the Wright brothers, this Japanese scientist who studied snow crystals for 30 years, Buckminster Fuller. So there's all kinds of stamps that do have that contents. And as I mentioned before, I use some of these for my teaching, for writing. There's a very inexpensive and effective way to teach with this. You don't really need to be a stamp collector these days. You can just Google the images and you'll get all kinds of illustrations. So there's an even more specific area, chemistry on stamps, which is sort of what I do. There's a concept, a term called chemophilately. This was coined a few years ago by an Israeli organic chemist, Zvi Rappaport. And that's really the philatelic study of chemistry. There's a US stamp from 1976. It was a centennial of the American Chemical Society, back when first-class mail was 13 cents. And it is really dedicated to chemistry. So that's a really good stamp. And you can see also chemistry as one of the branches of science. Here it is in the tree of science. So you see here math and physics, and here's chemistry, one of the branches in this tree of science, a nice stamp from Spain. Now, again, going back in time, in a long time, we can think about the 4 classical elements in Greece. And so back in that day, Empedocles proposed that everything is made up of 4 elements, combinations of these 4 elements, classic elements: air, fire, earth, and water. So that's kind of the original elements, right? And so there are stamps, like these 3 sets of stamps from 3 different countries. These are from Liechtenstein, Switzerland, and France, that represent these classical elements from Greece: air, fire, water, and earth. And it's very interesting how they select, how they represent these elements. So they have, for example, a flying bird, a cloud, maybe a tornado, these ways of representing air, and so forth for fire, water, and earth. Some of these elements are even used in more modern stamps, but you'll recognize again the same 4 elements. This is a stamp from Switzerland used to promote environmental protection. Again, the 4 elements representing the world around us. You can see those same 4 elements in this set of stamps from Portugal, issued in 2007, more modern, more contemporary stamps with those 4 elements, or even these ones issued in Germany last year. This is 2011, 4 stamps with really nice ways of representing those 4 classical elements. So I would say a few centuries after that, this guy came along, Democritus, right? Not a chemist, of course, but someone we talk about in freshman chemistry. It's the concept of the atom, the smallest indivisible particle of matter, and so he appears on these two stamps from Greece. Alchemy appears on stamps. There's all kinds of stories about alchemy. Typically Europe, Middle East, maybe you'll recognize some of the names. Paracelsus is one of my favorites. There's a stamp from Germany issued in 1993. It was the 500th anniversary of his birth. That shows, of course, Paracelsus. By the way, that's the real name of the guy. So he just said, you can call me Paracelsus. And so if you look at the stamp in detail and you do a little sort of background check on this stamp, you'll see these symbols, right? And these are all alchemical symbols. Those alchemical symbols represented substances that these alchemists work with. And some, in fact, represent planets or the moon, so you recognize some of those. So silver, the moon, there's that alchemical symbol for silver. Or iron, the symbol, and Mars. So those are going back to these alchemical times. Fast forward a few centuries and you get into Boyle, who you have studied for, his gas law. And so Boyle appears in this stamp. It's sort of the beginning of modern science, modern chemistry, at least in the UK. The counterpart in France, of course, was Lavoisier. Lavoisier appears here on this so-called maximum card. Maximum card is like a postcard. It's prepared in advance, and the date the stamp is issued, they attach the stamp. This is a Lavoisier stamp. They apply a cancellation. That's typically a souvenir for collectors. This is from 1943, a couple of other stamps with Lavoisier. In the US, Priestley, one of the discoverers of oxygen, appears on this stamp. And he did all kinds of experiments. Killing mice was as kind of a collateral damage of that work, but he is usually credited with the discovery of oxygen. Gay-Lussac, French chemist, which you have also seen in freshman chemistry, appears on this beautiful French stamp, an engraved stamp. Avogadro, another guy with a really long name, right? And so Avogadro appears on this stamp. The nicest thing about this stamp is that it shows Avogadro's law. The entire law is on this postage stamp. The law, of course, is translated here in English, but the entire law, Avogadro, his signature, all in this Italian stamp from 1956. We move on to Pelletier and Caventou. These were two French pharmacists or pharmaceutical chemists who isolated or discovered quinine back in 1820. Quinine, of course, for more than 100 years was the standard drug for the treatment of malaria, right? So very important drug. And the stamp, it's hard to see here the stamp. This is the first day cover when, again, the stamp was released. But you can see here that the stamp shows the molecular structure, the formula of quinine. And so that appears on this stamp. Humphrey Davy, again, master of the discovery of alkali and alkaline earth metals. He discovered sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and barium. He was really good for discovering elements. He's also credited for the development of this safety lamp, a miner's lamp. So it's a big name in the history of chemistry. Johann Gadolin may not be a very well-known chemist. He is the father of Finnish chemistry, founder of Finnish chemistry, and he discovered the element yttrium. The element gadolinium, another lanthanide, was of course named after Johann Gadolin. And it's kind of interesting how, give or take a few years, but 200 years after the discovery of yttrium, yttrium becomes part of high-temperature superconductors. So who would have, thought about that 200 years earlier? Then we have a stamp that shows Berzelius. Berzelius was really one of the founder of Swedish chemistry. He appears on these three stamps, and he's the one that coined all these terms. Catalysis, polymer, isomer, allotrope, those all go back to Berzelius. So it appears on those stamps. This is another stamp that shows Berzelius. It's pretty unusual stamp. First of all, Berzelius is from Sweden, was from Sweden, and this stamp is from Grenada. Right? Don't really ask me why, because I have no idea. But the stamp is very interesting. If you look closely at the stamp, it shows this completely weird periodic table where the elements are organized in alphabetical order by symbol, right? Which is crazy. And not only that, but included are a number of elements that of course were not known at the time of Berzelius. I mean, californium and gadolinium, and I mean, it's all kinds of elements. The truth is that Berzelius is also credited for developing the system of chemical symbols, the symbols for chemical elements. These one or two letter symbols go back to Berzelius. So talking about the periodic table, we'll detour for a few minutes into the periodic table. This is one of the early examples of relationships between the elements. This is not really the periodic table, but Jeffrey, back in 1718, started thinking about connections between elements. Okay, so that wasn't really the periodic table. Much later, you may have heard of Dobereiner. Dobereiner came up with these triads. These were specific groups of three elements that share some properties, some chemical, physical properties. The triad part, though, it's very interesting because he found groups of three elements, say lithium, sodium, and potassium, where the middle element, right, sodium, had the average, the atomic weight, the average atomic mass for this element was roughly the average of the other two. And that is still true. So lithium 7, potassium 39, the average is 23, right? And that's where you find sodium in the periodic table between lithium and potassium. So he came up with that mentions triads. However, Dobereiner appears on this stamp from East Germany from a few years ago because he also developed this lighter, right? That's a very cool piece of equipment. Now, this is a time when there were no safety matches, right? So it was a very clever way of having portable fire. Think about it, right? And so it's a pretty awkward, contraption. You have this container with sulfuric acid, a little reservoir with sulfuric acid, a bar of zinc. You drop the acid. The equation is here. You will generate hydrogen gas. This hydrogen gas will, get in contact with a catalyst, right? That's finely divided platinum, and will spontaneously catch fire. Okay? Not really what I would like to carry in my pocket, right? But if you think about it, 200 years ago, it was pretty cool to be able to carry fire, not to have to use 2 stones, right? To have a fire. So that's pretty cool, Dobereiner. Gmelin may not be a well-known chemist, but a step up from Dobereiner, he started seeing more relationships between the elements, and he came up with sort of a precursor to a periodic table. It's not very common. It's a V-shaped periodic table, in which besides triads, groups of 3 elements, you had groups of 4 and even 5 elements that were related. So you can see, for example, magnesium, calcium, strontium, barium. Right? So it's a tetrad, groups of 4 elements. And so these are, you know of course where we are going. These are the precursors to groups in the periodic table. Okay, so of course enter Dmitry Mendeleev, and this souvenir sheet from the former Soviet Union shows the original manuscript for the periodic table. So it was handwritten, of course. Manuscripts used to be handwritten. It was submitted on February 17th, 1869. It was accepted for publication. It was, I think, a pretty good paper. And so this is the German translation, 1869, from the original manuscript in Russian. And so here, this is the original periodic table, as we know it. A couple of details worth mentioning. What we now see as groups were horizontal rows. And so chromium, molybdenum, tungsten, or lithium, sodium, potassium, rubidium, cesium, elements that were known at that time. There's no noble gases, there's a few shortcomings. Now, the most important feature, perhaps, is that he saved some spaces, as shown here with a question mark, for elements that were not known at that time. Not only he saved those spaces, but he predicted the properties for those elements. He predicted the stoichiometry of the oxides, the densities, the melting points. And it turns out that within a few years, scandium, gallium, and germanium were discovered. And they had the properties that he predicted, and of course everybody started believing in this periodic table, and the rest is history. And this is a much more recent view of Mendeleev, the periodic table in the background. Of course, you can get into this recent stamp from Spain that looks like a Mondrian painting with all these blocks in the periodic table, different colors, and it still shows those holes, right? The elements that were not known at the time of Mendeleev, so scandium, gallium, and germanium. This, of course, is technetium. Technetium is the only radioactive transition metal. It took another 60 years, took a lot longer to synthesize, to prepare technetium. It's not found in nature. But again, the existence of an element between manganese and rhenium was predicted by Mendeleev. This is another version of the periodic table, the latest version, 2011, the official periodic table from IUPAC, the International Union of Pure and Applied Chemistry. It does show that element CN, element 112. And again, that's to explain the title of my presentation, right? Hydrogen to copernicium. And so it turns out that element 112 was named copernicium by the discoverers, of course. And I was present at the 45th General Assembly of IUPAC in Glasgow when they discussed the name and the symbol for this element. Of course, there's no stamp for copernicium, so I'm just showing Copernicus, of course, the element named after Copernicus. It was interesting that initially the discoverers proposed the symbol CP, and that symbol was rejected by IUPAC, right? Because CP stands for a few other things, including cyclopentadiene. It's also the heat capacity of a substance at constant pressure. So that symbol was taken. And so basically they had to come up with another symbol. And the symbol they proposed was CN, but was approved. And CN is what appears now in modern periodic tables. I should give you the latest on the history of the periodic table. Just a few months ago, the discovery of elements 114 and 116 has been confirmed. Now they have proposed the names. They are being discussed. They are not approved. They are not official yet. The names are flerobium and livermorium. Pretty ugly names, right? And so I do have to explain where those come from. Flerobium, right, comes from Georgy Flerov, a Soviet nuclear physicist. At least that's what the discoverers are proposing. The other one, of course, comes from Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory, where that discovery was made initially. And so we see what happens, flerobium and livermorium. You heard it first here, okay? So anyway, so that's with these two, with the periodic table. Now, so back to history, we were looking at the development of chemistry. We look at Liebig, really the father of German chemistry. And a lot of important work with fertilizers. So the symbols of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium appear on this retort. Different ways of representing benzene on this stamp from Belgium honoring Kekule. You see the representations of benzene. Louis Pasteur was a chemist by training. It's a pretty well-known figure in science. He appears on stamps from many different countries. Syria, Ivory Coast, all kinds of countries. There's about 40 or 50 different stamps with Louis Pasteur. And I usually try to select stamps that show some of his work in chemistry, enantiomers, enantiomeric crystals, for example, not really, rabies, right? Because there's all kinds of crazy stamps that show Louis Pasteur with dogs, right? And so, those are not really my favorites. Nobel, right, a chemist by training, a chemist that did make a lot of money. And so that's Nobel Prizes. This was the centennial of the Nobel Prizes, a US stamp, much more recent, 34 cents for first-class mail. And appears also on stamps from many different countries, some of which have no connection to Nobel themselves. They just wanted to honor a scientist. So, Uganda, Senegal, Vietnam, all kinds of countries that show Alfred Nobel. And a few Nobel laureates are on stamps. So we have Fischer, the Fischer that received a prize in chemistry, the first one, the second one, 1902, for his work on the synthesis of sugars and purine. Moissan, Henri Moissan, is one of my favorites. I'm an inorganic chemist, so I like the elements. And so he got the Nobel Prize in chemistry for his isolation of fluorine, the element fluorine, and also his work on high temperature reactions. So the interesting part here is that the stamp shows this equation is the wrong equation, right? Hydrogen does react with fluorine to give hydrogen fluoride, right? And the equation is balanced and everything. But of course, that's not how he discovered the element. It was the opposite, the reverse reaction. He was doing an electrolysis of potassium fluoride dissolved in hydrogen fluoride, and that's how he did an electrolysis and was able to generate fluorine. The stamp also reminds us that there's a sort of a semi-precious stone called moissanite that is again marketed as a substitute for diamonds, but the name comes from Henri Moissan. Rutherford was a physicist by training, and this is the only stamp that shows the famous gold foil experiment. So you see these alpha particles being deflected, being when they approach or they hit the nucleus of the atom, right? Now, he got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1908 for this work. I kind of call, with due respect, Rutherford the ungrateful physicist, right? Because not only he got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, and I'm okay with that, but a few years later he said, the only science is physics, all the rest is stamp collecting. Right? Which of course makes me very happy as a stamp collector, right? But still, that's at a time when, of course, chemistry and physics were much closer than maybe they are today. Van der Waals, Nobel Prize in Physics, 1910. We've heard of Van der Waals. Curie, of course, the only woman to receive 2 Nobel Prizes. Physics, 1903, chemistry, 1911. And so he's a very popular figure in science, a physicist by training. She appears on stamps from many different countries. There's about 110 different stamps with Marie Curie. And so last year, of course, we were celebrating the International Year of Chemistry and the centennial of her Nobel Prize in Chemistry. So she appears on these 3 stamps from France, Sri Lanka, and Spain, issued last year. Now, she appears also in a few stamps with her husband Pierre, Marie and Pierre. They got together the Nobel Prize of Physics, that 1903. And so maybe you've heard about the Curie family being like a Nobel family, right? Because so Marie and Pierre got the Nobel Prize, in physics together. Then Marie got the one in chemistry. Now their children, Irene and Frederick, also got the Nobel Prize in chemistry. Years later, of course, 1935, they got the Nobel Prize for their synthesis of new radioactive elements, artificial radioactivity, not natural radioactivity. And so they appear on this stamp from France. And so maybe I should summarize what the deal is here with the Curie family. So here it is, Pierre and Marie, right? They got married. They had 2 daughters, right? Eve, was kind of the black sheep of the family, the only non-scientist in the family. And she was a writer. She wrote the first biography of her mom. She passed away actually 4 years ago. She was living in New York City. She died at the age of like 102, right? Now, on the other hand, Irene, right, which I showed on that stamp, married Frederick. They were both nuclear physicists. They got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1935. They had 2 children, Helene and Pierre. These are also nuclear physicists. They don't have Nobel Prizes, but they are very successful nuclear physicists. They both live in Paris. And I had the good fortune of meeting them a few months ago. So I went to the closing ceremony for the centennial of Marie Curie's Nobel Prize in Chemistry, and this is what I call my Forrest Gump moment, right? So they were there at the closing ceremony. I was very happy to just see them, right? I mean, Marie Curie's grandchildren. And then a colleague told me to just jump in the picture, right? So I then got in the picture, just kind of like behind the picture. And that's my Forrest Gump moment there with Marie Curie's grandchildren. Pretty cool souvenir. And then, of course, after the picture, I asked them, and they signed this cover. So it's a really special souvenir from that occasion. Now, there's another stamp that shows Grignard. So Victor Grignard with this huge mustache, right? But the stamp is not really that special. The cover shows the reaction, right? How to make a Grignard reagent, and everything is correct. So you take an alkyl halide, magnesium, diethyl ether as the solvent to make RMGX. So everything is correct, and that's pretty cool. Fritz Haber, right? Born Haber cycles, the Haber-Bosch process for the synthesis of ammonia appears on this stamp. Otto Hahn, right? The father of nuclear fission, right? The splitting of the atom. Nobel Prize in Chemistry again, 1944, nuclear fission. A lot of the work, of course, was done by his assistant, Lise Meitner. Because of politics at that time in Germany, she never really got the Nobel Prize, but she appears on a couple of stamps who recognize that she may, or maybe she should have gotten part of that Nobel Prize. Linus Pauling appears on this postage stamp from the US. That's pretty good. It's the only person to get is one of only 2 people who got 2 Nobel Prizes in different areas, right? For Linus Pauling was chemistry, 1954, peace, 1962. The only one, of course, is Marie Curie, chemistry and physics. There's only 2 people who got that 2 Nobel Prizes in different fields. So that's pretty cool. And Ziegler and Natta, right? Polymers, plastics appears on these 2 stamps from Italy and Sweden. It's very interesting how people try to represent plastics, polypropylene, all kinds of ways of representing that. Dorothy Crowfoot Hodgkin got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry, 1964, is sort of one of the pioneers of protein crystallography. This is part of the structure of vitamin B12. Right? You see cobalamin here, that's supposed to be a cobalt atom, a cyanide, cyanocobalamin, vitamin B12 appears on this stamp. And Mario Molina, who is still alive, appears on this stamp from Mexico as well, from Caltech. Chemists that are still around, so is Carl Djerassi, right? The father of contraceptives, the pill. That's more like the chemists on US stamps also, right? You see these 2 characters from the Muppets. That's part of the collection. They should be there. All right, so that's with history, right? There's a lot more to the subject. So atoms, molecules, minerals, that's part of what I consider chemistry. Small atoms, typically associated with nuclear energy, appear on stamps. And so some are larger. Krypton-86, this isotope was used 40 years ago for the definition of the meter, and appears on this French stamp. Uranium or plutonium are presumably here. This stamp from the UK with generation of electricity. The UK, of course, is still today the only country that doesn't show the name of the country on the stamp. Only the profile of the king or queen, because they were the first one to issue stamps, right, the penny black. They said, oh, we don't need to show the name of the country, right? We don't need to. Everyone else should, right? So that's a little detail on this one. And so graphite, carbon, graphite, pencils appear on this stamp from North Korea. This is one of my favorite stamps. I don't know how well you can see, but this stamp, of course, shows Buckminster Fullerene, C60. But here in the center, right, I don't know if it's easy to see, but there's a darker circle. Right? It's hard to see, but there's a darker circle. So this is my favorite stamp because it was made with thermal ink. And so when you really have the actual stamp, you touch the stamp, and the center part of the stamp turns white. And this is supposed to be a helium atom trapped inside C60. So I did that, and I took another picture, and that's how the stamp looks like, and that's a helium atom trapped inside C60, which I think it's a pretty cool stamp, really. Think about getting a letter with a stamp like that. Sulfur, many other elements appear on stamps. Mercury, a sample of cinnabar, mercury sulfide. Copper appear on these stamps, an unusual triangular stamp from Cuba with nickel, gold on this Canadian stamp, all kinds of stamps with minerals. They tend to be very visually appealing, and I like them when they show at least the name or the formula of the mineral, right? So we can learn something, we can use them. Like these stamps from Zaire. Also nice photographs of minerals, stibnite, cinnabar, wolframite, these stamps from China, stamps from Greece that again show different minerals, different sources for the elements. These stamps from Peru are also pretty cool because they show a sample of a mineral, the name, the formula of these minerals, and also the unit cell parameters, right? That's pretty sophisticated information for a postage stamp. So zinc sulfide, for example, is cubic, and when it's cubic, all these angles are 90 degrees, or the sides are the same. It's a little cube, right? So that's pretty cool for stamps. Aluminum on stamps, right? You could specialize, not just minerals, but say aluminum. I really like aluminum a lot, so that's a sub-collection. You can talk about mining bauxite, right? The common mineral ore, the main source of aluminum. So there's stamps from Jamaica, from Hungary, mining bauxite, samples of bauxite. That's all part of this subject. You can look at the whole Hérault process, the industrial production of aluminum, Charles Martin Hall, Paul Hérault. These stamps from Venezuela that show, again, the aluminum industry. And aluminum smelting, right, recycling of aluminum is very important. Of course, this little topic, right, can get really carried out of hands if you start including stamps like, Mickey mining bauxite, right? So that's on this stamp from Sierra Leone, so why not? That's part of the collection. Chemical symbols and formulas, so silver, sodium chloride, calcium fluoride, all kinds of symbols. The 20th Congress of IUPAC was in Moscow, 1965, and everything appears here with symbols of elements. That's pretty cool. The pink color that you see here, it's glow in the dark, fluorescent ink, so that's a really, really cool stamp to look when you look at the real stamp. Ozone, right? Ozone appears on these stamps from Switzerland and Croatia. This is kind of funny because they wanted to show O3, right? The formula of ozone covering the sun. But most people think that this is a hole in the clouds, right? And that's the opposite, right? Ozone, that it's supposed to protect us from solar radiation, right? The ozone layer. And that's not really, it's just a black circle, right? It's not a hole, trust me. And last year, again, for the International Year of Chemistry, there were at least a couple of stamps from Slovakia and Belgium that show also the structures, these space filling diagrams for carbon dioxide and water, the formulas of carbon dioxide and water, of course, the critical elements in photosynthesis, the conversion of carbon dioxide and water mediated by, of course, sunlight to get glucose, right? Extremely important, all related to photosynthesis. And other stamps that show chemical formulas. So here, this stamp from Israel shows here H3PO4, right? Phosphoric acid on that stamp. This from Germany that show these oxides that are present in borosilicate glass, right? Silica, boron oxide, aluminum oxide, sodium oxide, all present in glass. Sodium chloride, of course, appears on this stamp from the UK. The Braggs, father and son, who got the Nobel Prize in Physics, 1915, X-ray diffraction. It's pretty amazing. The son did contribute to this work, got half of the Nobel Prize when he was only 24 years old. Nobel Prize, so that's pretty incredible. High temperature superconductors in this Japanese stamp, urea, beautiful representation of urea, the carbonyl group, the two amino groups. Wohler, of course, is credited for the first synthesis of urea from cyanide, ammonium cyanide. And so also he contributed to the discovery of isolation of pure aluminum and other things. Pretty cool stamp. Here's an interesting stamp from the former Soviet Union that shows this unusual species, right? It's a dirhelium octachloride dianion. So this was first made back in 1963 in the Soviet Union, and the stamp is honoring really the 50th anniversary of the Kurnakov Institute in Moscow, where this molecule was first made. It's very interesting. The stamp was, the compound was first made in 1963. And only 5 years later, right, 1968, this stamp, this celebration decided to include this molecule on the stamp. Now, but there's a very interesting connection to this stamp because the Russians didn't know that this was the first example of a molecule that contained a quadruple bond. Now, the story is more interesting than that. The person who figured that out, Al Cotton, did that in 1964. A year later, he figured out that rhenium bond length was really short. He explained what was going on. It was a quadruple bond, right? So there's single, double, triple bonds. There is such a thing as a quadruple bond. And just in case you don't know, right, Cotton was a faculty member here at Texas A&M. So not back in 1964, but he was a faculty member here in the chemistry department for 35 years, right? 1972 to 2007. And some of the most important textbooks in inorganic chemistry were written by Al Cotton. Advanced Inorganic Chemistry, Multiple Bonds Between Metal Atoms, Chemical Applications of Group Theory. So you should be, this is part of your legacy. Okay, so that's Al Cotton. Other stamps that show formulas, here you see ethylene, benzene, propylene, butadiene, also these stamps from South Korea. Adamantane, kind of a very specific hydrocarbon, appears on this stamp from Czechoslovakia because adamantane was isolated for the first time from a sample of oil back in the 1930s in Czechoslovakia. Prolog was the first one to synthesize adamantane back in 1941. And 2,2-difluorobutane, very specific molecule. Again, it's not a very important hydrofluorocarbon, appears on this stamp from Switzerland. The stamp is really celebrating the 100th anniversary of the Geneva Conference. That's where organic nomenclature was developed. The numbering, the positions of the substituents, the multiples, and so forth. And nobody knows why they selected this stamp. Most people say it just had the right length. That's the story for that stamp. And so this stamp from Switzerland, again issued last year for the International Year of Chemistry, shows the structure of vitamin C, ascorbic acid. That's pretty cool. It turns out that vitamin C was synthesized independently by Sir Norman Haworth and this Swiss-Polish chemist Tadeusz Reichstein. It was Haworth who got the Nobel Prize in Chemistry for the synthesis of vitamin C. I'm sure Reichstein was pretty kind of disappointed with that, but he kept going. He had lots of great ideas. He was the first one to synthesize cortisone, and so he got the Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine in 1950, right? So never give up, right? And so this stamp from Cuba shows two other drugs used for the treatment of malaria. Penicillin G on this stamp from Hungary, and of course Alexander Fleming. Biochemistry appears on stamps, as you can imagine. DNA is a nice looking molecule. Here's the double helix of DNA. Lots of different stamps show DNA, the passing of the baton here, right? DNA, that's pretty cool symbol. Then we have Watson and Crick, all kinds of representations of DNA. This is again a really cool set of stamps from Macau, because what they show here is not only base pairs, guanine and cytosine, adenine and thymine, G and C, A and T, but when you look at them side by side, you see that these have 3 hydrogen bonds, 2 hydrogen bonds. Look at the stamps side by side, and it's all correct, and that's really, really cool. Think about getting a letter with these stamps, really cool. Glassware also appears on stamp, all kinds of pieces of equipment, retorts, condensers, distillation equipment appears on stamps. Chemistry students, chemists, right? So you could be on a postage stamp. So we have, for example, stamps from Libya, North Korea, all kinds of stamps with students at work. This is a good one, right? Because this stamp from Mauritius shows here a girl that is doing mouth pipetting. I hope you don't do that, right? No bubbles, right? No bubbles. And the stamp is celebrating the International Year of the Child, right? So that's not so good. And so there's chemists also at work, lab technicians, all kinds of chemists on stamps. This is an interesting one with someone on a wheelchair still working in the lab. So that's pretty cool. Chemical industry, some examples, chemical industry in Canada, fertilizers, petrochemistry appears on many different stamps. This is a good one. So Monaco, right? The country of Monaco, small country of Monaco, is known for what? For tourism, right? Car racing, maybe gambling, right? There's nice casinos there. Not for the plastics industry, right? But Monaco wanted to show the plastics industry, and they messed up really badly, right? Because they wanted to show methane on this stamp, and first of all, they showed methane as C4H, right? The wrong formula, right? And of course, methane, right, it's the main component of natural gas. 80-85% of natural gas is methane. It's not used for making plastics. And they wanted to show here this methane getting into this meat grinder, becoming gasoline or plastics, or just a disaster for a design of a stamp, right? Now Monaco, right? Of course, if I was living in Monaco, I would be hanging out at the beach. I wouldn't be, spending my time designing stamps, right? And so Monaco has made mistakes before. This is a nice, interesting stamp that shows FDR. So President Roosevelt was a fairly well-known stamp collector. So he appears on this stamp with a magnifying glass, all these stamp albums, looking at the stamp. Believe it or not, apparently he had 6 fingers on his left hand. So that's hard to believe, but that's you can count them. You can count them. It's pretty incredible. So then we have young Queen Elizabeth, the gold industry, salt appears on this stamp, the rubber industry, isoprene, very cool. There are lots of stamps related to rubber, soap, chemistry industry, of course, it's everywhere. Sugar industry, either from beets or from sugar cane. Matches, right? Phosphorus appears on stamps. There's some chemical postmarks. These are not strictly speaking stamps, but chemical postmarks. So the International Symposium for the Use of Computers in Analytical Chemistry, right? That's pretty specific, right? And they had a conference back in 1974, and they had a special cancellation, so that's a pretty cool item. IUPAC Congress in Sydney in 1969. These are names of some elements that appear on these so-called slogan meters. These were pretty common in the 40s and 50s, still used today, but these show nickel, nitrogen, selenium. This is when first class postage was 3-4 cents, so a long time ago. I like this one because I don't know if you can see this well. I do some research with nickel, and it says, nickel, your unseen friend. Right? I don't know exactly what it means, but I like it, right? Nickel is my friend, right? And so chemical companies, right? DuPont with the original better things for better living through chemistry, right? Fisher Scientific, Monsanto, polystyrene, all chemical companies, peroxide, fluor, rayon, all kinds of items related to chemistry. Some chemistry departments have their own machines for postage, so Bristol, Freiburg, Camerino, Oxford, the Organic Chemistry Laboratory, the Free University in Berlin, the German Chemical Society, that's all part of the collection. Elemental town names, this is pretty cool. These are small towns in the US, real towns, that have names of elements, right? And so I don't know if there's someone from Boron, California here. Typically these are very small towns. There's Boron, California, Neon, Kentucky, there's Lead, South Dakota, Lithium, Missouri, Platinum, Alaska. These are all real towns. Krypton in Kentucky, Cobalt, Sulphur, Indiana, Sulphur, Kentucky, Radium, Kansas. These are all real towns. Now, I'm happy to tell you, right, that Texas is there. There's a Carbon, Texas. I don't know if there's someone from Carbon, Texas. It's a very small town. Population in 2000 was only 225. Right, I did have to look this up. The small town of Carbon, Texas, it's here about 140 miles west of Dallas, here on this Highway 6, I think. Anyway, so that's Carbon, Texas. And so that's special for you. And there's also Silver, Texas. Right, there's Carbon, Texas, there's Silver, Texas. That's another even smaller town. Right? Population is about 30, right? And somehow they did mail this letter. There's a small post office there, and that's from Silver, Texas. Now there's also chemical town names, right? And I'll show you a few. There's like 200 in my collection, but bromide, ozone, hematite, potash, mica, chloride, sapphire, North Carolina, that's pretty cool. Telluride is fairly well known. And the last one is James, probably, not chemical, but I include, right, bond in this. And of course, there's some in Texas as well. So there's Sulphur Springs, Sulphur Bluff, Marble Falls, Goldsboro, Mineral, Jasper, Silverton, that's all in Texas, right? I know that some of you may be interested in crystallography, X-ray diffraction, so for those of you, there's Crystal City, and even more fun, there's Crystal Beach, right? These are all towns in Texas, right, that have names that I think are related somehow to chemistry. And to conclude, I want to show you three last items. So this is a cover that was flown on the Hindenburg, right? And so I teach so this went from Stuttgart in Germany, May 6, 1936, across the Atlantic to Lakehurst in New Jersey. Now the date here, right, May 6, 1936, it's exactly a year to the date. This was the first flight of the year 1936. This is exactly a year before the famous crash, right? May 6, 1937. Of course, there are no covers from that one. And very interesting though when I teach about hydrogen, the properties of hydrogen, how it's a very flammable gas, and so forth. So that's a cover that I have in my collection, was on the Hindenburg. The next one, again, it's a very cool stamp because it honors Sir Derek Barton, right? It's all his work on conformational analysis. Here represented these 4 rings that make a steroid. It's the backbone, the skeleton of steroids. Nobel Prize in Chemistry in 1965. And of course, he was a faculty member. This is another stamp from Guyana, and he was a professor here at Texas A&M until his death in 1998. So the The last 12 years, maybe the best years of his life, I don't know, he was at Texas A&M. So again, someone to keep in mind because he was here. And this is an interesting item that I found on eBay, right, the 4 places. This is a cover that is signed by 10 different Nobel laureates. Right, someone went through the trouble of collecting these signatures. They are shown here. You recognize some of the names. So Wilkinson, Lipscomb, Prelog, Urey, Seaborg, all these Nobel laureates that signed that cover. So it's a pretty cool item that, you know, I'll never sell it on eBay, right? But anyway, it's a very cool item. For those of you who are maybe interested in this subject, I'll mention a couple of things. There's a website here that contains a lot of information about chemistry and physics related stamps. We have about 165 members worldwide. I am not the only one, right, who collects stamps related to chemistry and physics. We publish a magazine, and there's all kinds of information. There's also this, the news magazine for IUPAC. It's called Chemistry International. You can find it online. It's available for free. You can view it or download the PDF, where every couple of months I write half a page on stamps related to chemistry. So you can look at that. There's some, I've been doing that for 5 or 6 years. And to conclude, I really need to acknowledge my colleagues at IUPAC, UNC Charlotte, Cengage, of course, for funding NSF, which allows me to do this as part of my outreach. And last but not least, this is my email address. These are all stamps in my collection. If you are interested in getting any of these images, the whole presentation is huge, but I would be more than happy to email anyone the JPEGs from any stamps in this presentation. Of course, the video will be available, I think, online as well. With that said, I will be more than happy to try to answer any questions you may have. So thanks to all for coming.